So you have to absolutely understand this if you want to have a positive self-talk. Now, what is a positive self-talk? It's you talking to yourself in a positive way. But the key to understand that is that when you talk to yourself, right? You have a self. Someone else has a self. I have myself. You have yourself. It's a self. It's not an elf, okay? It's a self. We all have a self. I mean, it's technically an elf with a curve, but we all have a self, okay? You have a self. Someone else has a self. I have a self. We all have a self. So when you're talking to yourself, it's it helps a lot to disidentify from yourself because you are not yourself, right? I mean, you technically we identify with it, but if you really think about that, the idea, the fact that I have a self and you have a self, right? And the selves that we have are equal because all humans are equal. So to someone else, you are someone else. To you, I am just someone else, right? But to me, you are someone else. So if we flip that rotation of perspectives, it's really that we are equal, right? So when you talk to yourself, think of it like you're talking to your best friend. Because when you talk to your best friend, you're talking to someone else's self. But you also have a self. We all have a self, right? So when you talk to yourself, make it just as important as your best friend's self. Because your best friend has a self, right? You have a self. You both have a self. And both selves are very important. They're equal, right? So it's more like make yourself feel good as if you are a little bit separate from yourself. Because what happens is that when we identify with ourselves, we think somehow that we're just there, right? We don't really think of ourselves as ourselves. We don't think of the fact that it's given to us, right? The fact that myself, it's like it's myself, but it's not me, right? It's mine. Means it's given to me. Means I should do my due diligence to take care of it. And same to you as well. Like you have a self. Your self is your self. It's not you, right? You are awareness. I am awareness. We're aware of things. You have a self. So your self, our body, has like a mind of its own. So when we talk to ourselves, it's important to kind of understand that dynamic because when you do, it helps a lot in terms of how you talk to yourself, how you go about every day. Because when you talk to yourself, you can be proud of yourself because the self that you have, the stuff you've been through, it's like you've been through a lot. We've all been through a lot. So yourself, it's a self. It's your past self that you can be proud of and you can make happy. And your future self is also your self in a different time frame that you can make happy. So I hope that it makes some sense. It's a very simple thing, but I find that it helps a lot for me personally with my self talk. And I used to have a very, very negative self talk. Okay, it was really bad. But I feel like this helps a lot because every time I even try to go that way, I'm like, no, my self is a self. And if it was someone else's self, I would not treat it this way. So my self is just a self that I should treat the same as I treat anyone else's self because all selves are equal, right? I keep wanting to say elf. Anyway, you get the idea, right? The fact that every time you talk to yourself, like kind of separate the your and self into a separate thing. Because if you look at English language, we have yourself as one word. But if we separate that, if we put like a separation between your and self, someone else's self and your self or my self, it comes down to a self. It's just a matter of understanding of which one do we have control over, right? So we have control of ourselves. So the self that you have, your self, is the one that you have control over and the one that you have most direct access to speaking, right? So yeah, I hope that you try that because I think it's really cool. I got all excited just realizing that because every time I do something, I'm like, well, I'm proud of myself because my past self has gone through a lot and your past self has gone some, has beat some challenges, I assume, and I bet it has. So you should be proud of yourself because the self that you have been given in this life, something to be proud of and take care of. Right? Right? So I hope that makes some sense, and yeah, thank you for watching.